Hello and welcome into the Coast to Coast Show. I'm your host, Eric Ruby, and there's a lot to cover in the world of sports, so let's get straight to it. There's no better place to start than college football. Joining me are our college football and NFL analysts, Nate Smith and Jacob Lev. Welcome to the show, gentlemen.
How you doing?
Thanks for having us.
I'm doing great. Now, guys, number one ranked Alabama has carried their ranking well this season so far, starting off 4-0 with an average margin of victory of 41 points. So the question is simple. Can anyone stop the Crimson Tide from taking home yet another championship this year?
Short answer for me is no. I don't think so. Like, you just look at their upcoming schedule, the only two games, in my opinion, they could possibly lose. They go at LSU in November, and then they have a home game against Auburn. I believe it's the last game of the season. But you just look at what their quarterback, Tua, is doing. Unbelievable. 72.5% completion percentage, over 1,000 yards, 12 touchdowns, no picks. I mean, they're just a well-oiled machine right now. Saban has this defense balling as usual. Tons of NFL prospects all over the place. So for me, no one can stop them.
Jacob?
I happen to agree with everything Nate said. The fact that Tua hasn't had a turnover this season is just key. You know, if you can limit your turnovers, no one's going to beat you. And also, you have Najee Harris, you have Damian Harris, the two Harris running backs. Jerry Jeudy, the wide receiver, you're going to see him in the NFL one day. This team is just way too talented for anyone to beat them. I do think LSU could give them a run for their money, but I still think Alabama is still the better team. And also Auburn, I just don't trust Jarrett Stidham to play well in a big game like that. So I truthfully think Alabama is going to win the championship.
So you mentioned LSU, maybe a team to challenge them. What other teams are maybe in your mind? You said Auburn, probably not. Are there any other teams maybe that a lot of people aren't thinking about that might pull off an upset against, again, a very, very good Alabama team?
I just don't think so. I just think this team is just from top to bottom filled with future NFL talent, which most college programs don't have. So that's why I think Alabama will just stroll past this season and, they'll be lifting that trophy again. And Tua will be a two-time championship.
The only thing I would say is SEC championship game, maybe if they play at Georgia. Georgia could give them a run for their money, or assuming they make it into the college football playoff at this projected pace, you never know once you get to that. They play something like an Ohio State. Anybody can lose on any given day. But looking at that, I think they're objectively the best team in the nation right now.
All right, well, we talked about good quarterback play so far, and there's this little award in college football. I don't know if you know what it's called, the Heisman Trophy. There's a lot of names out there. Who would you guys consider your Heisman favorites so far this year? Jacob, we'll start with you first.
Well, look, Tua is definitely in the conversation, but I'm going to go Will Grier, a West Virginia quarterback. He's just been so productive this season. I know they played one less game because of Hurricane Florence a couple weeks ago, where their game against NC State got canceled. But he still has over 1,000 yards passing, 14 touchdowns and 3 interceptions. And if he continues on this pace, you could see him throw for 40 touchdowns this year. And I just don't see how the committee can pass on him as the Heisman if he does put up those numbers.
Nate, agree or disagree?
I agree. I think Grier's a good pick. He's in the top 3 for me right now. But for me, I'm going to keep the Bama train rolling and go with 2A. I mean, the dude is a monster. Crazy stat of the day for me. 3 out of the 4 games he's played so far, he hasn't even attempted 20 passes because Bama is either up by so much or they take him out or they just don't even need to throw the ball that much because they've just been dominating teams. Now, granted, their early schedule has been fairly easy, and honestly, their schedule as a whole, aside from maybe a couple tough games on the stretch, isn't too hard. But you look at the numbers, I mean, if this guy was to play 4 quarters in every game so far, he would have video game stats, and he already kind of does, which is the scary part. So for me, it's got to be 2A.
All right, same question like I asked with Alabama. Anybody that's maybe going to sneak in the conversation, your dark horse Heisman candidate for this year?
I don't know if he's really a dark horse, but someone that's not getting enough love, I think, is Jonathan Taylor, the Wisconsin running back. I know he's still in the conversation, but I think he's closer to the top, like by Will Grier and Tua, because he's been putting up video game numbers. And I don't think this Wisconsin team is as good as what people are saying, because Alex Hornibrook is a very mediocre quarterback. But this Jonathan Taylor kid, he can play. He reminds me of Melvin Gordon. He reminds me of Monty Ball. And what do they all have in common? They were all Wisconsin running backs.
There you go, Nate.
I wouldn't necessarily classify him as a dark horse, but Dwayne Haskins, quarterback for Ohio State, only a sophomore, having a great year so far. He's probably in my top 3 for Heisman running right now. So, however things go down the stretch, I think he could definitely make a solid run for it.
All right, well, let's transition from the national scene to the local scene here. The Herm Edwards experience has been in full effect at Arizona State University, and the Sun Devils find themselves at a very interesting 2-2 record going into this weekend's game against Oregon State. Now, I have 2 questions for you guys. 1, are you on the train? And 2, what should Sun Devil fans expect from their team for the rest of the season? We'll go with you first, Nate.
It's tough for me. I don't know if I'm fully on the train. I know everyone was starting really hot, 2-0 out of the gate. Everyone was freaking out, losing their minds. Got the new coach Sumlin over at U of A. You got Chip Kelly at UCLA. They both started horribly. So Herm looked like a home run to begin. But then we dropped 2, so now we're 2-2. And I took a look at the schedule before we came on today, and there's at least 3 losses guaranteed left on that schedule. So that brings you to 5 losses. And for me, those are at home against Stanford, at USC, at Oregon. I really see no way how we can win any of those games. Plus, not to mention, we go at Colorado next week, who is undefeated. I mean, they could beat us. So that would be up to 6 losses. So I guess my answer is no, I'm not on the train. But I don't think it's all Herm's fault. I like what he's doing, and I think he's going to take us in a nice direction in the future. I just think with the current roster and the talent we have right now, with the other teams in the Pac-12, no, I just don't see it really working out very well.
I am on the Herm train. I've been on the Herm train since day one. I'm a Jets fan. Herm Edwards coached the Jets. I've had that love for him for years now. Look, the 2 losses we had, that ASU had, it's been pretty close. A lot closer than people would have expected in the beginning of the season. We only lost by 1 possession against University of Washington. Look, are we going to make the college football playoff this year? No, we are. ASU is not going to, but I think ASU can still be a 7-5 team, which is what they were under Todd Graham last year. Wait till Herm has all of his recruits in. Again, still playing with some Todd Graham players there. Once Manny Wilkins moves on, N'Keal Harry, unfortunately, will probably move on too. I'm excited to see what Herm has in mind with his recruits and his players in the coming years.
Yeah, there's definitely a reason why it's an interesting 2-2, because they started off the season so strong. You just beating down UTSA 49-7 to get that Herm train rolling, and then Michigan State comes into Tempe, and no Big Ten team has won there, and I think a very long time, 0-10 now, and they upset Michigan State. Brandon Reese hits that field goal, and then they go into SDSU with a lot of high expectations, Herm's alma mater, and let's be honest, guys, they did not look that great. Their number 1 ranked run defense got ran all over by SDSU, almost like what happened last year with Penny. And then they go into UW, get a pick on the first play. Everybody's thinking, oh, that's great, ASU's going to be in it. If it wasn't for that pick, I think ASU could have lost that game by 30 points, because UW, every single pass, wide open. Jake Browning was on fire, but I don't even know if I can consider it on fire, solely because all of his receivers were wide open. So I think that possession, that turnover, and then the touchdown for ASU kept them closer in that game than what the score may realize. So it's been very high highs and very low lows for the Herm Edwards-led ASU. But I think it should be an exciting season. I mean, everybody who doesn't even follow ASU but college football knows Herm is electric. The quotes, leave it on the grass, you play to win the game, the turnover curls to get the girls. I mean, this ASU team compared to last year's Todd Graham team just seems to be having more fun. The players seem to have bought in more, and give it a few years, the coaching hire that everybody was questioning so many months ago might be one of the better ones out of that class. So let's jump right into the NFL, guys. The greatest show on turf 2.0? Well, maybe. Thursday night, the Los Angeles Rams and the Minnesota Vikings put on a show for everyone at the Coliseum. The offensive shootout would eventually end in LA taking the victory 38-31. Behind Jared Goff's career night, the third-year quarterback threw for 465 yards and 5 touchdowns with a perfect passer rating of 158.3, while Cousins was no slouch on the other side, slinging the rock for 422 yards and 3 touchdowns. This victory moved the Rams to 4-0 on the season. Now, Jacob, we'll start with you. After last night's incredible performance, would you consider the Rams to be the best team in the NFL?
I would. Look, this defense hasn't been playing up to standards. I know Aqib Talib's out for, a month and a half maybe. Marcus Peters was hurt too, but I think he was active last night. But still, this offense is so high-powered. Even if the defense is struggling, I think the offense will be able to keep them in the game and keep a lead for them throughout. I mean, Gurley had 83 yards yesterday. That's a bad game for him. That's a pretty decent game for any other running back in the league. Kupp, Cooks, and Woods had almost 400 yards combined receiving. If they could do this every week, which I think they can because all 3 of them are very talented, I don't see any team beating them. I really don't.
Nate?
Yeah, I'm going to have to piggyback off that, honestly. I mean, you look at just their roster on paper, it's ridiculous. You bring in Sue, you bring in Talib, you bring in Peters in the offseason for the defense. One thing I will say is it is a little concerning for me. It's early, but the defense has been giving up a good amount of points and honestly a good amount of yards too. And that doesn't really compute for me just because of the talent they have and the names they have, but they might figure it out down the stretch. But echoing what Jacob said, on offense, it's been lightning. I mean, you got Cooks, Woods, and Kupp, who all could be a number one on some teams in the NFL, honestly. And you got all three of them on the same team. I don't know any secondary in the league that could match up with that. They're running wild out there. And I just got to shout out Sean McVay. 468 yards per game. That's crazy. And what's even more nuts is that's second in the NFL right now because the Bucs have been on fire. But I'd say by week 6 or 7, they'll be leading. But his offensive ingenuity and his play calling, I've seen route combinations and fakes and formations that I've never seen before. That man just thinks outside of the box. And not to mention Jared Goff. A lot of people question him coming out. Should we take Wentz? Should we take Goff? Jeff Fisher's first year didn't go great. But wow, he looked amazing last night. So yeah, I'm all in on the Rams.
Yeah.
There's a reason why Eric Dickerson calls him Jared Montana. He wears number 16, and he throws the ball like Montana years ago did. So you know what? There's a lot of hype with this team, but I think they're going to live up to it for sure.
Yeah, best team in the NFL, maybe, maybe not. The rest of the season we'll see. But we talked good. Now let's talk the bad. Well, maybe the bad. The New England Patriots fell to 1-2 last week after losing to the Lions 26-10. And if that wasn't bad enough, they allowed Detroit to have a 100-yard rusher for the first time since 2013. That's a 1,760-day drought. After last week's loss, are you guys officially worried about the Patriots, or is it same old in Foxborough?
See, I don't know if it's same old, same old. It does feel a little different to me, and I know everyone will say, it's September, don't worry about it. The Patriots do this every September. It's almost like an experimental period for them. They just, Belichick tweaks with formations and whatnot on defense, and everyone's not on the same page yet. It feels different to me, though. They're averaging on offense. Their offense is normally the good strength of this team, but they're only averaging 19 points a game so far, which is good for 25th in the NFL. Brady just doesn't have enough weapons right now. Gronk, obviously amazing. Either him or Kelsey, people will tell you best tight end in the league. But if he's getting double covered, Hogan's not getting open, Edelman's been suspended. Their number 2 right now is Philip Dorsett. He's not going to get open.
Now, what about the addition of Josh Gordon, recently acquired from the Browns?
Right,
Do you think he's going to open a lot of things up for Brady offensively?
I mean, he'll definitely help. It will be better. Everyone knows he's a great talent if he can stay on the field. I just don't know if it's enough. So,
Jacob?
I happen to agree with Nate. But also being a Jets fan, I'm a little always cautious about being like, oh, the Patriots are done, Because this has been happening for the last couple of years. They've been struggling out of the gate, but then they win 10 games straight, which I could see happening again. And also, I would be very curious to see what Bill Belichick does with the wide receiving unit. Josh Gordon, I think he's going to be active this week, so kind of curious to see how they're going to work him in. But also, there's a premier wide receiver that's a free agent still, Dez Bryant. Well, I don't know if he's premier anymore.
Maybe formerly premier wide receiver.
I've been saying since the offseason that the Patriots should be looking into Dez Bryant. Also, Rashard Matthews of the Titans just got released a couple days ago.
Could you imagine that locker room, though? Josh Gordon, Dez Bryant, and then Tom Brady over in another corner, and then Belichick trying to control them all?
Who's the one coach that could handle all those egos?
That would be the last name that I just said, Bill Belichick.
Exactly. So I wouldn't be too worried about him managing those egos in the locker room. But look, you got to give Brady the weapons. He's not getting any younger. He's probably got, 1 or 2 more years? Just give him as many weapons as. And they also have Julian Edelman coming back, which is something that I think we forgot to mention in a week. That can't hurt. So
definitely cannot.
That'll definitely be a big boost for them. One other thing I would say is they play the Dolphins this week, who are 3-0. If they lose to the Dolphins, I say you start hitting the panic button if you're New England. But let's see what happens this week.
All right. Well, obviously, every year there are teams that disappoint and teams that surprise. Now, which team would you consider to be the biggest surprise this year in the NFL?
Well, I was trying to think of a positive surprise, but there was only one team that came to my mind, and it's kind of a negative surprise, and that's the Vikings. I had them as one of the best teams in the NFC, maybe not as good as the Rams, as we mentioned earlier, but their defense has looked awful this year so far, and I thought they were a top 5 defense, if not the best defense in the league. Anthony Barr, who I thought was a premier player in the league, yesterday, he was embarrassed on 5 separate plays, and they all went for touchdowns. I just don't. Kirk Cousins does look great so far, but other than that, the team has just been very disappointing. And I thought they were going to come out of the NFC North and be a playoff team, be a Super Bowl contender. I just don't see it right now. I really don't.
Nate?
I agree with everything said about Minnesota. On paper, in my mind, they have the best front four defensively in the entire league, and they just have not been playing up to par. For me, the surprise, though, is the Kansas City Chiefs, as I'd assume most people would say. My man, Pat Mahomes, dude has been on fire. Week 2 against Pittsburgh, he goes out and throws for 6 touchdowns, no picks. Hasn't thrown a pick all year, nearly 67% completion percentage. Andy Reid has done a masterful job with Mahomes. Everyone was scrutinizing them when they traded up to get him. It looks like the steal of that draft. So right now, for me, it's the Kansas City Chiefs.
Well, I mean, there's still a lot of football left to play, and, well, football season is in full swing, but let's take a look in the MLB. Joining me at the desk are the co-hosts of the 14th inning stretch and coast-to-coast MLB analysts, Nick Aguilera and Alex Weiner. Now, guys, the MLB regular season is coming to an end, and some teams have already locked their spot up in the playoffs. But of the teams who have already clinched a spot, who would you consider the strongest going into the postseason? Alex, we'll start with you.
Strongest going in, I like the Astros personally. I just think they've been clicking on all cylinders as of late. They clinched the AL West fairly recently over the Athletics, who were surprisingly competitive with them. But they have the #1 bullpen as far as their ERA. Their starting rotation has really looked good and has gotten healthy. And the lineup is back to normal. It's back to healthy. You have Correa and you have Altuve in there. And you have some other unsung heroes like Tyler White, who have been really good. So for me, I think the Astros are the best built team for the postseason.
Nick?
Yeah, I'm just going to piggyback off of that. The Astros have the best bullpen in the league. It's hard to go against Verlander, Keuchel, Garrett Cole, and Lance McCullers in a 4-game series. I think that they probably have the best team. They hit for power, they hit for average. They're the strongest team coming in. In the National League, I don't see anyone really challenging them.
Well, how do you guys feel about the Red Sox? I know that record-wise they're incredible, and home run-wise they're also incredible.
Yes.
Any love for them going to the postseason? Would you put them maybe #2 behind the Astros, just as a threat this season?
I would put them #2. My biggest concern is that bullpen, because it has really struggled throughout the entire season, and they did not address it at the trade deadline, which I think is their biggest mistake this season. Obviously, the lineup is a juggernaut lineup with 2 MVP candidates in JD Martinez and, of course, Mookie Betts, who might be the front runner. But for me, I think that bullpen is what sets them away from the Astros. I think the Astros just got them beat there.
Bullpen troubles, Nick, do you agree?
Yeah, I think relying on Ryan Brazier in big spots is kind of going to hurt them in the postseason. I mean, yeah, they have JD Martinez, they have Mookie Betts, who are probably #1 and #3 in MVP voting this year. But that bullpen worries me. The back end of that rotation worries me. They have a big question mark at third base between Eduardo Nunez and Rafael Devers. So to me, they just have too many question marks to challenge the Astros.
All right, now the playoff picture is still open in some divisions, more specifically the NL West. With the Dodgers and the Rockies still competing for not only the division, but a playoff spot as well, there is sure to be chaos in the Wild Wild West. Now, Nick, what do you think eventually comes from this race? Who's in and who's out?
There's a really big series coming up between the Dodgers and the Giants. Dodgers pretty much have to sweep in order to get the NL West crown. I think that the Dodgers eventually drop 1. I think they'll get a wild card spot, but I think in the end the Rockies will pull it out. They'll be the NL West champions, and I think I think the St. Louis Cardinals will fall out of the wild card race.
Any hope for the Dodgers getting that NL West crown, Alex?
I just think the fact that the Rockies have that spot by a game right now is just huge. There's only 3 games left. That 1 game is big. I think there's a decent chance that they could tie, and we have a 1-game playoff to see who wins the NL West, which would be amazing to watch. But I think the Rockies have got it. They play the Nationals, who could play spoiler, but as far as the pitching matchups are concerned, they have to face Joe Ross and Eric Fedde. I think they'll be able to take advantage of the pitching matchups against the Nationals this week.
Yeah, the Rockies should be sending a nice thank you card to the Arizona Diamondbacks, who decided to be really bad for the last month or so or more, and then just decide to beat the Dodgers in a season series. But some unexpected teams have already clinched a spot in the playoffs and in a race for the pennant. The Braves and the Athletics. Now, they both took the baseball world by storm this season and blew past everyone's expectations. Between these 2 teams, who would you consider the bigger surprise? Nick, we'll go to you first.
I think the Atlanta Braves are the biggest surprise. They have a lot of young players. I don't think anyone envisioned Ozzy Albies, Johan Camargo, and Ronald Acuna Jr. to lead this team. They have a good mix of veterans and young guys. The rotation has been solid. Mike Fultonevich looked like an ace this year. Sean Newcomb looked really good as their #2. Anibal Sanchez has been a really big surprise. He pitched well this season. I think that the Braves look very good right now. I think they could be very dangerous in the playoffs.
I'm going to disagree and say that the Athletics are more surprising for this season. I just think that with the Braves, obviously you have those nice young pieces with some veterans there. I feel like they were more equipped to break out the way that they did. For the Athletics, that pitching staff was currently Trevor Cahill and Edwin Jackson and Brett Anderson, names that we haven't heard in a couple of years, have some relevance. They've been getting the job done, and that super bullpen has really been terrific. And they blew away expectations as well.
I mean, it was only a few months ago we were clowning the Athletics on the internet for having nobody show up to their games, and now they've clinched a spot in the playoffs. I mean, what a turnaround about midway part of the season. But last question here, guys. It's always fun looking at the playoff picture, but if you had to guess, which non-playoff team this year has had the best shot to make it next year? We'll go to you, Alex.
I was really impressed with the Tampa Bay Rays this year. I think they have the right manager in place in Kevin Cash. They made the most out of what they had, which is not a lot of talent going into the season, but they made great trades. They got Tommy Pham. They made an enormous trade with the Pirates to get Austin Meadows and a couple other big names for Chris Archer, who they needed to get rid of anyway. So I think the Rays are the team that could make that jump next season. They already might win 90 games with the roster they had. So I think with the right manager and the front office who knows what they're doing, I'm going to go with the Rays here.
Nick?
You know, I really like the Rays as well. Kevin Cash has been pretty much a genius this year. He's led that team who they thought they were going to be under 500, but he led them to 90 wins, probably 90-plus wins. They're relying on G-Man Choi right now to get it done, and he's stepped up. And, they have a good mix of supporting characters, but they don't have that superstar. I think if they can go outside a superstar, they're definitely in position to compete for the playoffs next year.
All right, guys, great job. And that will do it for the first episode of the Coast to Coast Show. Thanks to Nate Smith, Jacob Lev, Nick Aguilera, and Alex Weiner for joining me. We'll be back next week with a new show, but until then, have a great week. See you guys then.